Well, it's wonderful to be here again. By again, I mean for the second time in the last 20 years. I don't know, I spoke here once a while back, and maybe other times too that I don't. It seems like the longer I'm around, the less I remember accurately. But it is good to be here, and I love it when the unplanned comes together and looks like a plan. And what I'm referring to is the music today, the daily word. It seemed like all of that was like, if I could have chosen what would go in there to sort of fit with what I wanted to talk about, I couldn't have done a better job. So that indicates to me Spirit is at work in ways that we don't always understand, that there is a unity to our consciousness and to our experience, and I'm grateful for that. So I wanted to talk about unity as a spiritual path and what education has to do with that. The first thing I want to say is that unity is a spiritual path. It is as legitimate a path, as good a path as you can be on. And I say that because I feel like sometimes unity people feel like, well, I need to be doing something in addition to this, and that's okay, or they feel maybe a little bit hesitant about thinking about, or don't really think about themselves as being on this path. But it is as legitimate a path as any you would find in Christianity or Buddhism or any other religion. It does involve definite ideas and practices and a community. All right. What is a spiritual path? Well, what is a path? It provides a direction to get from one place to another. And when we talk about a spiritual path, we're not talking about something as a physical location necessarily. We're talking about a movement of soul, an expansion of soul or consciousness, right? So we can think of the path as being just as much inward as outward, and both. It's a path that provides directions to get from one place to another, to get to where you want to go. Unity as a path bears certain fruits along the way, and sometimes we start thinking that the fruits are the point of the journey. And if we do think that, it's okay, because we'll eventually find out that that isn't the case. We sort of learn as we go along. I know from my own experience and from observation, I'm on this path. I started pretty far away from the destination, farther away than a lot of people. I think that's why I had to go into the profession, if you will, of ministry and education, because I had so much more to learn than other people and so much more to grow than other people. Have you ever felt that way, that what you're doing is like, okay, I got so far to go? Okay. So I'm getting there. What is the destination? Every spiritual path, religion has a sort of an idea of what the ultimate destination is that they're moving toward. For the Buddhist, it's nirvana, right? It's the extinction of suffering. It's the attainment of the Buddha mind. For others, the place we're going is heaven, and you have to do a bunch of stuff while you're alive to assure that after you die, you'll get there. So the destination is pretty much certain. In a way, right? So we call it different, enlightenment, samadhi. We call it by different names. What I think the simplest name, the way to understand it, is just to use that word heaven. This is what we want. We want heaven. But for unity as a spiritual path, we don't think of heaven as a place you go when you die. We think of it as, and understand it to be, a state of consciousness. And for Charles and Myrtle Fillmore, the co-founders of Unity, that it was something even more than that. And this more that they projected as the destination of the spiritual path, this more is so far beyond our ordinary conceptions of what is possible that you almost never hear about it, but you're going to hear about it today, just a little bit. This more is both for individual and community. Their vision was shaped by their interpretation of, interestingly, the book of Revelation. Not really the whole book, just kind of towards the end when it starts getting good. I don't know if any of you have ever read Revelation, but as you kind of go through it, it's like, oh my gosh, there's plagues and there's the Antichrist and there's blah, 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 blah. Oh my gosh, there's this horrible stuff. I quit. I'm not going to read any more of this. So you don't ever get to the good part, the New Jerusalem. All right? The New Jerusalem is the destination of that story and the destination of the spiritual path as the Fillmores understood it. This is from a book, an article or a chapter in a book called The Restoration of God's Kingdom. It's written by Charles Fillmore. And he starts out with this quotation from Revelation. He said, "The city that John saw was among men. Behold, the tabernacle of God is with men." Okay, well, I'm going to ask you to pardon the non-gender neutral language of this and understand that men and mankind and so on really is referring to all of us, all humanity. Okay. "Behold, the tabernacle of God is with men, and he shall dwell with them, and they shall be his people, and God himself shall be with them, and be their God, and he shall wipe away every tear from their eyes. And death shall be no more, neither shall there be mourning, nor crying, nor pain anymore. The first things are passed away." And then Charles writes, "This all describes what is to take place here among us. No reference is made to its being among angels, nor is it stated that it was established at the time John saw the vision. It means that heaven is to be consummated in new conditions on earth." I'm for that. Right? And it's so far beyond what most of us can see. And when we look around at the world of immediacy, and especially if we watch the news, we might think that's so far away. I have a certain way of looking at the news, by the way. I do watch the news. I watch news programs. Sure, a lot of New Thought people and Unity people think it's not a good idea for your consciousness, but I see it a little bit different way. I look at the news and I say, well, what was aberrant today? Because what you see on the news is aberrant. It's not the norm. That's why it's called the news, right? That's why it's interesting. Oh, look, this horrible thing happened somewhere. Okay, did it happen in your world? It's possible that it might, right? It might be that might be the case. But for the most part, every day, the news is not what our life is about. I wonder sometimes if we love the news so much and the news stories just because our lives are a little too calm and boring for us and we need a little bit of excitement. I don't know. But anyway, I also watch the news not only to see what was aberrant today. What was aberrant tells me what the norm is actually. But I also watch it because I want to, in my consciousness, bless the people who are in those stories. I want to behold the presence of God with them. I want to behold the support of Spirit with them because I know that is the case. We don't always see the aftermath of some of these things, but Spirit is always there. New conditions on the earth is possible. I feel myself drifting away from what I was originally going to talk about, but that happens sometimes. One of the things I taught when I was teaching in the ministerial program was church history. And I'm very interested in history, and not just church history, but history of the world kind of stuff. And the one thing that I know from studying history is I would not want to live in any previous era, not even going back 20 years. I would not. Because I think so much human progress has been made over the centuries. I mean, my God, just living in Missouri with air conditioning. Why would you want to live in Missouri before air conditioning? Not me. No, thank you. We've seen so much social progress just in my lifetime that I wouldn't want to go back to those days and have to fight those battles again. It's not that there aren't more battles to be fought, but it is that there has been progression. You can see it when you look back. So it's coming. The conditions are changing. And one of the points that Mr. Fillmore wanted to make in this particular chapter is that it is very much up to us. The principles are there. The teachings are there. The ideas are there for us to shift our consciousness from our humanness, our limitations, our bigotries, to shift into that universal consciousness, that Christ consciousness. That's the sort of the ultimate goal. As we do this as individuals, as more and more people do that as individuals, the world has to change in terms of its conditions. The more enlightened beings there are, the more spiritually centered people there are, the closer we move to that age and those conditions he's talking about, because it is fundamentally about human conditions. But the Fillmores went beyond that notion of, and this is the part that is shocking to a lot of people in Unity if they've never come across it before, their vision went beyond the notion of a heaven on earth, but actually an idea of a continuous, eternal life. Mr. Fillmore wrote in another chapter, the goal of man is eternal life, and in each incarnation, they believed in reincarnation, in each incarnation that goal is brought nearer if spirit is given an opportunity to express itself. When this is done, the true spiritual body will replace the physical body, and all men will become like Jesus Christ. He's thinking of the story of the ascension, and he visualized that story as Jesus being physically transformed into a pure spiritual body that could only be seen by those who were in a high enough state of consciousness to perceive it. Now, whether you take this idea literally or whether you think of it sort of metaphorically, there's something very powerful in this notion of the spiritual body. I've read studies of prayer that indicate that prayer can be effective not just as a kind of placebo effect, but can be effective, for example, on living organisms who do not have error consciousness, who do not have error thoughts to break down. They're simply very simple organisms that when they are prayed for, they flourish. Right? So it's not psychological on the part of the organisms that happens. At least I don't think it is. I mean, I believe consciousness pervades everything. And maybe that's just like another story or another step beyond that. But the point is that the kind of prayer, there's different kinds of prayer. One kind of prayer is to try to tell God what needs to be done. Right? God, you need to get me this job. Okay? There's that kind of prayer. How does that kind of prayer work for you? Work pretty well? Sometimes it does, right? Sometimes it does, right? And the other kind of prayer is whatever's for the highest good prayer. And people who have studied done these little prayer experiments with different kinds of organisms, it might be bacteria, it might be a seed, trying to germinate a seed. What they've discovered is that both kinds of prayer do work in terms of helping the organism flourish, but that the prayer of the highest good or thy will be done actually is more effective than the one where you're trying to tell spirit what to do. So that's the way I pray, and we'll bring it coming back to the spiritual body. If I'm asked to pray for somebody to have a healing, I don't go by the diagnosis that this person has this or that. And part of the reason I don't go by that is that I have discovered that sometimes doctors don't accurately diagnose a case, right? And so I might be praying for the wrong thing, and I might not understand what's happening. So I just try to behold in that person that I'm praying with the presence of God manifesting in them, as them, and through them. I try to sort of hold that vision and that idea of the spiritual body, okay, or the presence of the spiritual energy with them, and trust that presence to support them in the best possible way for them. So that's a way to pray. In case you're like me and you don't really know what to do with diagnoses, okay, someone's got, if you try to get real visual about it, well, somebody's got this issue in their pancreas. Well, I guess I could study physiology and find out where the pancreas is and try to visualize that happening. But frankly, I'm too lazy and I'm interested in other things. So So I don't want to study physiology. But anyway, that's sort of the idea, again, going back to the idea of the spiritual body. Is regeneration that they talked about, the Fillmores talked about, is that possible? Okay. I suspect it is, but that's a little bit beyond where I am right now, okay? I suspect it is because of my experiences with prayer and meditation, that I know that as I open myself to that divine presence, I feel that energy and things happen in a positive way, whether I'm praying because of something I'm experiencing or whether I'm praying because I want to support someone else. So where the destination of the path, is it that kind of regeneration? Physical, eternal sort of transformation of the body into the ascended body? I think it's okay to hold that vision. I don't really know, but I do believe that I can hold that vision of the spiritual essence of what we are, the core of what we are in our absolute unity with the universe and with the divine. I can hold that vision and expand my consciousness in that direction. That can be the destination I'm looking at on the horizon as I walk this path. And I have found, as far as paths go, spiritual paths, life in general, is that you can sort of look at it as a continual movement in a polarity, if you will, between seeking and finding, between asking and receiving, between knocking and having doors open. In your daily life, what do you do, right? What you do is you go out looking for something and you find it and you come back home. Or maybe you go to work, and why are you going to work? Well, maybe your work is important to you and you're seeking some meaning in your life because of that, but you also know that in doing the work, you're providing sustenance for the body, you're putting a roof over your head, and so on and so forth. If you are between jobs, and I've been there, your most important job is seeking another job most often, isn't it? Right? Finding something else to make your life meaningful, finding something else to be a channel for your Unity students, a channel for the infinite a flow of abundance to come into your life. One of the things that I learned about abundance and prosperity, as we call it, and we talk about it in Unity, is not to be too reliant on a job or a particular thing for your good to come to you. To be sort of open to your good coming to you from all different kinds of surprising directions, to recognize that as the universe supports you, its idea of what you need is better probably than your own, and to be open to that. All right. So this path, what is the essence of this path? What is I would call it the quintessence. You know that word quintessence? I like that word. I like it because I have these associations. Quintessence means fifth essence or fifth quality, right? And in ancient times, they thought of the world as consisting of four fundamental elements: air, earth, fire, and water, right? The fifth essence, those are the four essences. The fifth essence was the mysterious essence that caused things to be alive. And I also like it because you find very often in spiritual paths the attempt to reduce the path in a very simple way to, I'm holding up my hand, 5 points. Have any of you walked around here or someplace else and seen a list of the 5 basic unity principles? Right? We like to do that. You look in other traditions, you'll find the same sort of thing, the 5 essences of the path. So the quintessence of unity are those 5 principles. First one's God, right? But not God as an entity outside the universe that's looking down on us and judging us and all those sorts of ideas. Not God as an old man in the sky. God as omnipresence. Everywhere present doesn't mean partially present. This is a thing that's really powerful when you recognize it. The very cells of your body, the presence of the divine is there. And this is very different than some ideas of the physical body and materiality, because certain religious approaches and philosophies have looked at the body and the materiality as something inferior and have not thought of the presence of God being there. But omnipresence, omnipotence, absolute good, and I like omniscience, the all-knowing consciousness, all of that is there within you. This links with the teaching of Jesus that the kingdom of God is within you. The realm of God is within you. According to the Gospel of Thomas, Jesus also said it's inside you and it's outside you. That's the idea of omnipresence. Or as it's taught in the Quran, everywhere you turn, there is the face of God. Omnipresence, omnipotence, absolute good everywhere. First principle. Second principle follows from that logically. If that divine presence, that power is everywhere, then it's in you. There's divinity in humanity. And in unity's, the original teaching is that divinity was called the Christ, or the Christ consciousness, and associated with Jesus as the one who showed us the way to that, who demonstrated that. So there's that divinity. The third one is the law of mind action. This is the one everybody likes. Even if they aren't particularly interested in spirituality, religion, they like the idea that if they visualize jewelry, they'll get it. Or that if they visualize an empty parking space, they'll get it. So we kind of use the law of mind action in sort of, trivial kinds of ways, but people find that it is so. And to me, the law of mind action also is simply an aspect of the divine consciousness. It's a fundamental idea in divine mind, as are the physical laws of the universe that shape everything. Laws are ideas, they're not things, right? So divine law and divine mind. The fourth one is, I'm looking down like I don't know it, but I really do. The fourth one is affirmative prayer. It's a way you apply the law of mind action the best. The best way to apply it is through prayer, and through this teaching of prayer. Now notice when we talk about quintessence, we're not getting into a lot of detail here. Unity prayer teachings have a lot of details and a lot of possibilities, as do our ideas about the nature of God, as do our ideas about the law of mind action. And the fifth principle is now generally affirmed as just practice what you know. Practice today what you know, and as you do that, you will grow. Ooh, I just created a poem. I wasn't expecting that. I hardly ever rhyme. Okay. So unity, though, was fundamentally, as a spiritual path, was fundamentally initially seen as a path in which you learn. Myrtle Fillmore wrote a beautiful little article titled Life is a School. She really saw this as, I like to say, the universe is a divinity school. We're here to learn about our divinity, right? So education is a very important aspect of what we are about and what we've always been about. There was a little passage from one Mr. Fillmore's writings that was published in a lot of on the cover, sort of the cover page of a lot of the Unity books over the years, in which he describes what unity is. Now, to be fair, Charles and Myrtle both described unity in a lot of different ways over the years, but this one evidently really grabbed people. He wrote, unity is a link in the great educational movement inaugurated by Jesus Christ. Our objective is to discern the truth in Christianity and prove it. Somebody likes that. Yeah. Our purpose is to help and teach humanity to use and prove the eternal truth taught by the Master. So you have those words, learning, teaching, truth, the Master, right? Jesus as the Master. Now, I understand that unity has in some ways moved away from being, from talking much about Jesus or using the phrase Jesus Christ. I understand that because I was in ministry in New York City, and I've taught in the school over the years, and I recognize that we have people from a lot of different traditions who find themselves in unity, who may not have this positive relationship with Jesus. Sometimes they're former Christians who don't have a positive idea about Jesus, to be honest, right? We have Jews, we have Muslims, we have people who were brought up without any particular religion, okay? And so they may not have that connection to Jesus that the Fillmores felt in their time, in their culture. But I don't want us to drop him, because that's part of the reason, that's one of the main reasons I'm in Unity. I saw that the Fillmores, of all the different spiritual paths that I explored before I decided to start one, the Fillmores, of all as I saw, took seriously what he said. Not the religion about Jesus, but what he said. Yes, what he taught. And so that's why for my theology doctoral dissertation, I wrote about the historical Jesus, because to me, it's important to look at, well, what did he actually say? Because the more you get into biblical scholarship, the more you realize that a lot of times people, the author of the gospel is the one who actually said Jesus said this, and Jesus may not have historically said it at all. But there are certain sayings most scholars will agree, yeah, this undoubtedly originated with Jesus. So I took those and did my work on that. And I want to take this opportunity to give thanks to Reverend Erin and to the congregants of this ministry at Unity Village Chapel who volunteered as subjects in my experiment that I did and wrote about. So I want to officially now have the opportunity to thank you. This is the book where you can read about it. Reverend Erin and your chapel are mentioned in the acknowledgments. The Hidden Realm of God, in which I discover or explore what Jesus actually said, or most probably really said. And I realize I have strayed from my original path for this talk, and I feel okay about that, but I will just say a few things about what Jesus taught. One is very important, is the realm of God is inside you and outside you. We mentioned that in connection with omnipresence. Jesus taught a principle of expansion, right? A mustard seed, leaven in meal, the guys who take the talents and invest them and cause them to grow. And I love that he taught this because we now know scientifically that the universe is a process of expansion. Its expansion is actually accelerating, the physical universe I'm talking about. But I also know that ideas grow in our consciousness. And so we want to be very careful about what ideas we let into our consciousness, obviously, and what ideas we want to intentionally plant there, because those will grow. And any investment of energy we make in the world will grow. And Jesus, of course, taught love and forgiveness. That's essential to everything he taught. And he taught radical optimism. He didn't use that phrase. That's my phrase, right? Because see if you can think of anything more radical than this idea, more radically optimistic than this idea. Seek and you will find. Seek and you will find. Not maybe you'll find if the conditions are right and if you're lucky. Seek and you will find, right? As an absolute law, ask and you will receive, knock and doors will be opened. Persist in that, and you will grow and you will expand and you will taste the sweet fruits of the spiritual path, which are peace and love and joy and abundance and health and community. You are the people of God. We are the people of God. We are the people of spirit. Not exclusively, but we are that. Know that as you go forward. Every face that you look at, everywhere you turn, there is the face of God. There is a caring, loving person who will support you. There is an interesting person who has stories to tell that you've never heard and you wouldn't guess by looking at them. Those of you who are live streaming, we're glad to have you in virtual reality world. But we would love to have you come here and meet these interesting, loving, caring, supporting people, because it'll be good for you and it'll be good for them. And so I close. Thank you very much.